Whispers in the Roses, a forbidden romance. The sprawling estate of Waverly Hall was known far and wide for its breathtaking rose garden. Nestled among the verdant hills, it boasted every variety of rose imaginable, from delicate white blooms to vibrant crimson blossoms, each carefully nurtured and tended to by the estate's devoted gardener, Thomas. The garden was his pride, but little did he know it would also become the setting for a love that would change his life forever. Chapter 1. The First Meeting. Thomas, a young man of humble origins, had worked at Waverly Hall since he was a boy. With hands calloused from years of working the earth, he had an unrivaled talent for cultivating beauty. His connection to the roses was almost spiritual. He could sense their needs, and they responded to his care with blooms that enchanted all who saw them. One spring morning, as Thomas knelt by a bed of freshly planted roses, a voice broke through his thoughts. "They're exquisite," the voice said softly. He turned to see Lady Eleanor, the daughter of the estate's lord, standing just a few feet away. Dressed in a pale blue gown, her auburn hair catching the morning light, she was more beautiful than any rose he had ever tended. She looked at the flowers with admiration, but her gaze lingered on him with curiosity. Lady Eleanor had returned from London only days earlier, her time in the city leaving her weary of courtly games and societal expectations. She found solace in the peace of the countryside, and though her upbringing dictated that she should remain distant from the servants, something about the quiet, handsome gardener intrigued her. "Thank you, my lady," Thomas replied, standing and wiping his hands on his apron, his heart pounding unexpectedly at the sight of her. The roses have a way of bringing out the best in the land. From that day on, Eleanor began visiting the garden more frequently. At first, her presence was quiet and observational, but soon she began asking questions about the flowers, the seasons, the best ways to care for the delicate blooms. Their conversations were polite at first, but over time they became more personal, more meaningful. She found in Thomas a kind, thoughtful soul, someone far removed from the polished but shallow men of the court. Chapter 2. Shared Secrets. As the days grew warmer, Eleanor found herself drawn to the rose garden, not only for its beauty, but for the company of Thomas. He spoke to her about the simplicity of life, the satisfaction of seeing the roses thrive under his care, and the joy he found in nurturing something so fragile. Thomas, in turn, learned more about Eleanor's world, one of suffocating expectations, arranged marriages, and a life that, while filled with luxury, lacked the freedom she so deeply craved. She confided in him about her father's desire to marry her off to a wealthy lord, a man she did not love and barely knew. One afternoon, as they walked through the garden together, Thomas paused by a rose bush with vibrant pink blooms. "This one," he said, has taken a long time to bloom. It needed extra care and patience, but now, look at it, it's thriving." Eleanor smiled, understanding the deeper meaning behind his words.
"Not all things can be forced to grow where they do not wish to,"
she replied, her voice soft but laced with sadness. Their hands brushed as they walked, and though neither spoke of it, an undeniable connection had formed between them, a bond that went beyond their social standings, a bond that felt as natural as the roses themselves. Chapter 3. Forbidden Affection. As the summer months rolled on, Thomas and Eleanor's relationship deepened, though they both knew it was dangerous. She was a noblewoman bound by duty and expectation. He was a gardener, a man of the earth with no fortune or title to his name, but none of that seemed to matter when they were together. One evening, as the sun set over the garden, casting a golden hue over the flowers, Eleanor and Thomas found themselves standing beneath an old oak tree. The air was filled with the heady scent of roses, and the world seemed to stand still around them.
"I wish I could stay here forever."
Eleanor whispered, her eyes fixed on the horizon.
"With you."
Thomas turned to her, his heart racing. "You know it's impossible, my lady," he said softly, though the words pained him. But Eleanor shook her head. her eyes glistening with unshed tears.
Why must it be? Why should we be bound by rules that only bring misery?
Without thinking, Thomas reached out and gently took her hand. The feel of her soft skin against his own was electric, and in that moment the weight of their differences melted away. He pulled her closer, his lips inches from hers. "We may only have this garden," he whispered him, "but I will cherish every moment with you." And then, without another word, he kissed her. The kiss was tender, filled with the passion of love long denied, but also with the bittersweet knowledge that their time together was fleeting. Chapter 4, The Final Bloom. As autumn approached, the roses in the garden began to wither, their petals falling to the ground like tears. With each passing day, Eleanor's engagement to the wealthy lord grew nearer, and the weight of her impending marriage pressed down on her like a storm cloud. One evening, as Thomas worked late in the garden, he heard footsteps approaching. Turning, he saw Eleanor, her face pale and her eyes filled with sorrow.
I must leave tomorrow.
She said, her voice trembling.
The engagement is set.
Thomas felt his heart break, but he kept his composure. "I knew this day would come," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "But knowing doesn't make it any easier." Eleanor stepped closer, her hands clutching a small rose she had plucked from the garden.
I will never forget you, Thomas.
She whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks.
You've given me more than you know.
Thomas took the rose from her, his fingers brushing hers one last time. "And you will always be the most beautiful thing this garden has ever seen." As Eleanor turned to leave, Thomas watched her walk away, his heart heavy with the knowledge that their love, like the roses in the garden, had bloomed for a brief moment but could not last. Yet even as the leaves began to fall and the garden grew bare, the memory of their love remained, eternal, like the roots of the roses, hidden beneath the surface but always there, waiting for the chance to bloom again.